Greetings, ANCAP Radio, and welcome to another episode. Today, our featured guest is Todd Callender. Before we get to Todd and his bio, I want to say again, hello. Thank you for joining us on the replay and live, wherever you're at. Make sure you hit the like, subscribe, and retweet button. And here we go. Todd Callender, ladies and gentlemen, just to tell you a little bit about what this guy has been up to. Quite a bio and quite a potential nominee for our favorite Guy Fawkes Award. And we'll talk about the Guy Fawkes Award in a moment here, too, while we're at it. But anyways, Todd is an international lawyer, licensed in Colorado, but practicing primarily outside of the U.S. In August of 2021, Todd filed the first lawsuit against the U.S. Department of Defense, Department of Health and Human Services, and FDA, Food and Drug Administration, in Robert versus Austin, which sought to stop the vaccine mandates in the DoD. The filing of the suit caused the DoD to abandon the use of force or authorization from Secretary Austin, while ensuring access to judicial oversight to exemption procedures in nearly 400,000 service members. Robert v. Austin remains an active case in the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, where the principal issue being litigated is whether the genetic modification aspects of mRNA shots makes the vaccinated people into chattel property of the patent holders in the violation of the 13th Amendment, anti-slavery, to the Constitution. Todd was responsible for opening trade and commerce between the U.S. and Cuba in 1997 by obtaining the first U.S. travel business OFAC and export license granted during the period Cuba was designated an enemy of the state. Todd ran a 3-year clinical field of a needle-free mass vaccination device in collaboration with Cuba and the U.S. and Commerce Departments for 3 years with the consent of the U.S. Treasury Department and with observance by the WHO. Todd had an occasion to do business with many vaccine manufacturers and global health organizations at the time, including but not limited to Pfizer, PAF, FDA, the WHO, and Cuban Ministry of Health. He's been practicing law for almost 30 years now and currently serves as the principal of the law firm Disabled Rights Advocates, PLLC, and is the CEO of a large health and disability insurance group. So here we are, ladies and gentlemen, and the beauty of live events. We are currently working on our connection with Todd. So what did we do? This man is he's been putting in the work, we'll put it that way. And there's one piece of work that he's done recently that I think summarizes just the impact that he's been able to make in the areas that we just shared in his bio. So we're going to stream something here with Todd until we know we can get connected with him. But I think on the topic of COVID and vaccines and what's really going on, I had the privilege of hearing Todd speak live not too long ago, which is how we landed on him. And he's really the first person that I've ever personally come into contact with that I said, wow, he this guy knows what's going on behind the curtain, which I know we're always trying to figure out here on ANCAP Radio. And so with that being said, we are going to pan over to this most recent interview with Todd as we await for his arrival. So to our team, if you could do me a favor when you get this, to get that clip ready and start playing it. And as I wait for you to do that, I will say the Guy Fawkes Award, I want to nominate Todd for this as well. And you'll see pretty quickly in the interview here, as well as just hearing his bio, he's definitely a candidate for it. So if you have anyone you want to nominate for the Guy Fawkes Award, please make sure. We're going to go ahead and say if you want to email over your nominee, that's fine. But feel free to just message us right here on Twitter or tag us, DM us, whatever. Contact us here on Twitter with your nomination for the Guy Fawkes Award for the month of January. Winner gets $1,000 in Bitcoin straight to your wallet. So on that note, team, go ahead and take it away with the most recent interview with Todd Callender as we await for his arrival.
Now we turn to another guest. We have the lawyer, Todd Callender. He specializes in disabled rights topics and has worked in the disability, health, and life insurance industry for more than 20 years and focuses on the international convergence of biomedical morbidity and mortality risks in the global legal context. There's something very interesting that you discovered, like when you worked with the U.S. Department of Defense and the COVID or like COVID, rather COVID injections, vaccine injections aftermath.
Yeah. Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes,
we can hear you perfectly well.
Great. Yeah, it's nice to meet you both, by the way. Thank you for having me. And by the way, your guests I've been watching are just fantastic. What wonderful brains you brought to this, and yourselves as well. And I wanted to congratulate you both on
Thank you very much.
What a wonderful job you're doing. Amazing. The court of public opinion is yours. You've done a very, very fine job.
Thank you so much. But again, we couldn't do it without the experts, people like you.
Well, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, frankly, Brian, because it's our expert witnesses that have brought this education. And it's been a tremendous education. It really all started 20 plus years ago when I was working in the vaccine industry. My family owns the intellectual property rights to a needle-free mass vaccination device. So I spent 3 years in Cuba doing clinical field trials, the third phase clinical field trials, the very same ones that are happening with these purported vaccines right now. And I learned a lot about the vaccine industry in so much that I did business with the very same people that are now, executing on this genocide. So I did understand that, and that's frankly why it is that I filed suit against the DoD, the Health and Human Services, FDA, in August of last year. When I saw what was happening, including the pandemic bond that the World Health Organization, I'm sorry, it wasn't the World Health, it was the World Bank and the IMF put together. They used that they used the claim on that bond. It was $500 million denominated in SPRs, special drawing rights. But it was the first time that they had made the SPRs into a cryptocurrency. And so when that happened, it made sense to me that they were simply implementing the 2005 International Health Regulations in order to provide a global homogenized response to what it was they had created. And when use of force was authorized by Secretary Austin, I realized that this is a military operation, and it's a global military operation, and that it would be forced on humanity. And that's what I just couldn't help it. I had to file suit, and we did. And the point of filing suit was, as much as anything, to educate the U.S. military that what it is they're purporting to do is illegal. Per the Nuremberg Code, per the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights, per the International Convention on Human Rights, and per the Uniform Code of Military Justice and U.S. statutes. All of this is patently illegal. We all know that. And I'm shocked by how it is that nobody in government, pretty much in any country of the world, seems to care, minus a few notable exceptions, the president of Haiti, Magufuli in Tanzania, and a few others. But this is a very well-coordinated genocide in progress. And it made me dig a little bit deeper into how it is that these kill shots, as I call them, have called them for some time, operate, and what it is that they're seeking to achieve with them. So I'm sorry, it's a long way of getting to the point, which is what I think you're interested in. Is it the lipid nanoparticles, the delivery systems, is it the pathogens in the lipid nanoparticles? Is that the interest today?
Well, the most important thing is that I saw that a little video clip in which you were interviewed. I forget who it was that interviewed you, but you told them about the incredible, should I say excess mortality that was found? Yeah. And I don't know what caused this excess mortality. It must have something to do with the so-called vaccinations, of course.
Yes.
It may be the lipid nanoparticles, it may be the spike protein. I don't know. What do you know about this?
I do know. It's not even a question.
Okay, go ahead.
We have figured this out. So the lipid nanoparticles think of them like little bombers, and they're carrying payloads. And those payloads are oligonucleotides, messenger RNA, and synthetic DNA. Those are the payloads of these little bombers. In order to slip those little bombers past a human's natural immunity, they had to disarm people's natural immunity. They used three different HIV proteins, the GP120, the AD5 as an adjuvant, and the PP14. Those three proteins were injected into the humans for the purpose of allowing the lipid nanoparticle bombers to go into the cells, deliver those payloads, and then create synthetic DNA through recombinant mRNA and recombinant DNA. So we know all of that. We also know what the pathogens are that were delivered, at least in some of the shots, because it's in their patents. What is particularly alarming, in terms of all of these numbers, excess mortality and morbidity, is that the people that put these 3 HIV proteins into the shots disarmed people's natural immunity. They gave them vaccine-induced AIDS, and they didn't give them anything to reverse it. So now what you're seeing in terms of all-cause morbidity and mortality, the numbers that I got came out of the U.S. Department of Defense's own database called DMED. It's the Defense Medical Epidemiology Database. So again, going back to my lawsuit against the DoD, I called several expert witnesses who testified in both our temporary restraining order and in our preliminary injunction, one of whom was Dr. Teresa Long. You might have seen her, and some notable other ones, including Dr. McCullough. So we have come to understand all this with a group of medical experts, scientists that have come to our aid in understanding all of this. And everything that I'm telling you, I can back up with evidence, and I will be happy to do that. What is almost more concerning, but let me get back to that. So when you see a 1,100% increase in all-cause morbidity and mortality, that means something systemic has caused this problem. So you would see a natural, actually an abnormal increase in all-cause cancer, heart issues, inflammation issues, blood clotting. And I can actually send you what that looks like on a per malady basis. But when you see all of them arising to hundreds of percentiles in a class of people who are physically fit from 18 to 45, these are all military people, there is only one cause for that. And that is the destruction of their immune system. So that is the vaccine-induced autoimmune deficiency syndrome. We know this now. In fact, it's in science all around, and the Israelis, they're ahead of everybody else. They've already published papers on this. Everybody knows that. So the short answer to this whole thing is that everybody that got the shots was given some form or level of AIDS, autoimmune deficiency syndrome. The ones that got the one shot, it seems that they have about 30% of their natural immunity destroyed. By the time they get 3 shots, all their natural immunity is completely gone. And we're seeing that with our doctors, experts that are testifying in their practices, including on-base and off-base doctors that have come to see us. The real epidemic is now. I happen to be in the morbidity business. I'm the CEO of a large insurance group, and we underwrite morbidity risks, principally disability, accident, sickness, and health. Based on what it is we are seeing, the rates right now, excess mortality at 84%, excess every kind of disease at 1,100%. We are expecting a 5,000 or so % increase in excess mortality for this year. An enormous number. I don't think that it's by coincidence, by the way, that Moderna has now just received licensure of their emergency use authorization HIV vaccine. So they gave everybody AIDS, and here's your salvation is this vaccine, which seems to be a multiple dose vaccine. Almost worse than that, this ties into, again, going back to me standing on the shoulders of giants. These experts have figured out that there's an electromagnetic connection to all of this. You would have seen that during the lockdown period for almost 2 years, at least in the United States and several other countries, there was a massive installation of 5G networks on every single public school in the United States, and most private ones. There are brand new 5G arrays. Those are the 2 gigahertz to the 300 gigahertz range. Each one of those signals does different things, and in fact, they can mimic the very same kind of symptomology as COVID. So, for instance, in Halloween night 2019, Wuhan was the first city in the world to go 5G. They turned on 10,000 transmitters. Within the coming days, you have this massive problem with Chinese everywhere, literally falling over dead. which is not exactly the same symptomology as your normal COVID. You'd see people standing on the street falling over dead. It turns out that at the 60 gigahertz signal, which is a 5G signal, it's actually capable of separating oxygen from nitrogen. So some people, according to our experts, are literally standing on the street, and through the targeting device known as their cell phone, they were able to rip the oxygen from the nitrogen. People are breathing nitrogen and not getting the oxygen they need, literally falling over dead. 5G is like a butcher knife. It's a dual use item. You can use it to communicate, but at the same time, you can use it to kill. It so happens that a lot of the tests that we looked at in the scientific world focused on the 18 gigahertz signal. And this interplays with the lipid nanoparticles I'm going to tell you about. If you look at the patents of Moderna, Pfizer, I haven't looked at Johnson & Johnson, it might be there. All you have to do is type in pathogens. The COVID pathogen itself was chimeric. It was part bacterial and part viral. We know that now. The pathogens inside of the lipid nanoparticles, the ones that were created and are inside the lipid nanoparticles, inside of the vaccinated people right now, are also chimeric. In some cases, they are Marburg mixed with E. coli. They are Ebola mixed with Staphylococcus. When those lipid nanoparticles are exposed to an 18 gigahertz signal, they swell and become porous, which means that they will literally pour out those oligonucleotides, the proteins that cause people's bodies to produce these pathogens. That was the whole point of the messenger RNA technology, was to genetically modify people for the purpose of having them produce synthetic proteins. In the case of COVID, it was synthetic S proteins. After the 18 gigahertz signal, it will be other proteins, perhaps M proteins. They also produce, of course, the same HIV proteins. So when people, the subjects of these shots, are producing these synthetic proteins, these synthetic pathogens, they're actually shedding them on others. They were designed, the vaccines were designed to be contagious, in the words of Bill Gates. So when we look at what is going to be the next shoe to drop, I can already tell you it is Marburg. How do I know that? Because the Marburg provisions of the U.S. PrEP Act have already been put into action. There is theoretically no Marburg in the United States, and hasn't been for some time. How is it that in March of 2020, the Marburg provisions of the PrEP Act were invoked, which created funding from Centers of Medicaid and Medicare Services, CMS, in order to fund the goals of 42 CFR Part 70 and 71. That's the enabling statute for emergency public health for health and human services. As a part of that, it's 2016, I encourage you to look it up. You will find that there is a mandate in the case of a public health emergency to quarantine people, test people. They basically have carte blanche martial law. All constitutional rights are suspended, and frankly, what rights you get are granted by the CDC. So when you look at the confluence of all of these things, right now we've intercepted and found intergovernmental agreements coming from the U.S. federal government to fund the building of what we call FEMA camps. They're quarantine centers. And we actually stopped one in Cochise County, Arizona. So it is our contention that this 18 gigahertz signal will be sent out at some point. It will produce the Marburg hemorrhagic fever result. They will use that as the pretext to fill and occupy these quarantine centers and the hospitals that are already murdering U.S. persons to the tune of 1 million or so this last year. Will be used as receiving centers. And why do I say the hospitals are murdering people? Because I'm involved in trying to get people out of them. As part of my analysis, in trying to help people escape the ICU intensive care, I've stumbled on a variety of things that are really quite interesting from a legal perspective. And that is that in 2008, the U.S. government merged public health with law enforcement, with the judiciary, and with corrections. All four of them are now under one roof. So for instance, a typical example, and I get these every single day, to this moment, these are hospital homicides. Somebody will go to the hospital with a broken arm. They arrive with an ICD-10 code, right, the international codes. They're mandatorily given, per the hospital's protocols, because they accept federal funding, a COVID test. If the COVID test comes back negative, they are given another COVID test with a higher cycle rate. They invariably come back positive. At that moment, they are then moved to a COVID ward where they are given an IV bag with midazolam. Midazolam, right, that's the one they use for lethal injections. And what it does is tranquilize the lungs, and it lowers oxygen absorption rates to about 70%. That is then used as the pretext to move them into the ICU ward. Right? 70% oxygen is their limit. They then add in the remdesivir into that IV bag. Invariably, they end up on a ventilator, and the ventilators are operating and broadcasting on the 60 gigahertz signal, the same one that separates oxygen from nitrogen. It's only a function of time then from when they die. When they get on the ventilator, we haven't had any like that. My job in reference to all this has been, how do we stop these people from getting into ICU on the respirator? How do we get them out of the hospital? And I've had some luck. I'm really only shooting a little bit less than 50% able to get people out. Why is that? For instance, if I call the police and say, look, this patient didn't want remdesivir, that's a medical battery. And we go and we swear out a criminal complaint. Medical battery, medical kidnapping, false imprisonment. Those are 3 felonies in all 50 states. The police refused to investigate it. Early on, we were able to get health, safety, and welfare checks out of the police. So they would actually come and look at the chart of the patient and talk to them. That doesn't happen anymore. Now what happens is the police show up and they arrest or ticket the loved ones who are trying to be with their family, and they drag them away. And this is where I came to understand that the hospitals, public health, are part of the law enforcement apparatus. Similarly, when I sued the DOD and I got the response of pleadings, it was as though the Department of Justice had responded to a different lawsuit. I looked at it, it didn't make any sense to me who they were responding to, because elements of our case weren't even in there. However, it turns out that again, the judiciary has been combined, it's been merged with public health and law enforcement. What we were seeing were canned pleadings. No different when we would sue in a local court. One of the first cases this happened, we sued in Texas. There was a patient in ICU in Baylor University Hospital. We got a temporary restraining order in order for us to get an outside doctor to come in and give this person ivermectin. Within the next day, the hospital's lawyers showed up and they threatened our judge with the unauthorized practice of medicine. The TRO went away and our client was killed. How do I say killed? How do I know this? Because I have another case similar where my client went in not for COVID. My client went in with an aneurysm. The client was nonetheless treated in the exact same format I'm telling you about, with the midazolam, with the remdesivir. They put him in the COVID ward. He never had COVID. But what they did instead was they doped him up on morphine and fentanyl and a variety of cocktail of drugs. So I called the hospital's lawyer and said, listen, we want to move him to other care. And the hospital's lawyer told me, no, your client is going to die in our hospital. This was his words. So I called the chief of police, who already had a case with 3 felonies alleged and a case number. And I said, Chief, I want to do a health, safety, and welfare check of my client in the hospital. They're not COVID positive. They're being treated in this fashion. No, I'm not going to go there, says the chief. Why? The city attorney told me that this is a civil matter and we're not going to deal with this. Try and call the city attorney's office. No, they won't talk to me. Go back to the hospital's lawyer and say, I told him, I said, this is criminal and I will pursue this criminally. Too bad it's civil. Your client is going to die in our hospital. I filed a criminal complaint with the FBI. No avail, wouldn't investigate it. And sure enough, our client died in that hospital from starvation. He weighed 78 pounds at the time of the autopsy. He was dehydrated. He was starved. He was high on fentanyl and morphine and several other drugs that we did an autopsy on. We will be pursuing that case for the purpose of breaking up the immunities that are granted under the PrEP Act, the CARE Act, and the CMS waiver program, along with the same issues with the COVID mandates. The immunity is so broad. Where there's fraud, we can destroy that. We can vitiate those protections. In this particular case, I intend to do that on a criminal basis as well. We'll start with the civil suit. With some luck, we'll get past the fraud into criminality, and we'll be able to blow those immunities away. The reason I'm telling you all of this is because this is a master plan that has been extraordinarily well coordinated from a legal perspective, from a funding perspective, from every government function you can imagine, including the elimination of any constitutional or charter rights. That is by international law. I would encourage you to look at the 2005 International Health Regulations. All of this arises from Agenda 21, which I heard one of your other guests speaking about, which has three primary goals. It's the agenda for the 21st century arising out of the 1994 Rio Climate Accords. The three goals are, number one, the elimination of private property rights. That's communism. Number two, the elimination of borders. All you have to do is look at the mass migration in the United States and Europe. You can see that. And the reason why they want to eliminate the borders is because they want to eliminate sovereignty. Third plank of Agenda 21, which they call sustainable development, is mass depopulation. We're in all three of those phases right now. Klaus Schwab says you'll own nothing and be happy. Sovereignty is being surrendered. If you look at the OECD in 2016, they took the tax and fiscal policy of every member nation for themselves. They installed competent authorities that are managed by the OECD. It no longer matters if you have a prime minister or a president because the OECD has the authority. Those two planks are already done. Third plank, mass depopulation. We are in it right now by virtue of hospital homicides. They will roll out the Marburg or Ebola, it doesn't matter, it's hemorrhagic fever, triggering mechanism of the 18 gigahertz signal, and then we will have the quarantine camps completely loaded, and these people will choose and pick who it is they want to have survive this. At the end of the day, from a legal perspective, there's one really compelling and scary part to this. If you look at, there's a case, and I think I sent it to you, it's called, let me get you the exact styling, it's a U.S. Supreme Court case. And this is where we have the issue of legality. It's called the Association for Molecular Pathology versus Neurogenetics. Supreme Court case 2013. This arises out of earlier cases on genetic engineering, owns the rights to the synthetic genome. On page 6, halfway down, it starts with the words, "It is also." The court finds that use of messenger RNA in particular creates intellectual property rights in the synthetic genome that they create. What does that mean? That means everybody that got the shots, whose messenger RNA converted their cells into producing spike proteins, are now the chattel property of the intellectual property right holders, the patent holders. That's what this case means, and it's good law in the United States. And there's hardly any other law anywhere in the world that speaks to it or prohibiting it. And you can look at plans from NASA and DARPA dating back to 2001, where they speak of hybrid humans that they will own and operate. This is the magnitude of what it is we're up against. This is about the end of humanity, right? We are talking about an extinction level event where the owners, and I'll speak to that in a minute, have already pre-decided, right, who's going to live, who's going to die, who's going to become a machine, who do we own? So if you look at this from a genocide perspective, and here it is, I'm using that word genocide, frankly, we have a major fault in the causation, the elements of our case. Homicide is the unlawful taking of a human life. What is a human defined as? A Homo sapien. Right? These people are no longer Homo sapiens. In fact, they've already been named. The new species is called Homo genesis. So if they are no longer human, do they enjoy human rights? Do they enjoy the protections of the criminal code? And my sense is no, they probably don't. So what can you do with your property, right? This is chattel property. The 13th Amendment of the United States Constitution outlaws slavery, defined as the owning of a human. Well, they found a way around it. And no different than being able to experiment in this particular case on humanized mice, which already exist. That's what laboratories use. Now we have machinized, genetically altered humans. As I've spoken a lot, and I know you probably have some questions, so let me shut up for a minute and then I'll answer or go further, whatever you decide.
Two things. The U.S. Supreme Court decision that you cited, is that the one from 2006?
No, 2013.
2013. Can you give me the exact quote?
Yeah, I will. So the styling is Association for Molecular Pathology versus Myriad Genetics. And I'll give you the page 6 language exactly. I will send this to you, and it's already highlighted, but I'm going to read it to you. It is also possible to create DNA synthetically through the process similarly well known in the field of genetics. One such method begins with a messenger RNA molecule and uses the natural bonding properties of nucleotides to create a new synthetic DNA molecule. The result in this inverse of the RNA's inverse image of the original DNA result in ownership rights in the genetic synthetic result and the genome. So that is good law. The U.S. Congress has not written anything to overcome this. It has written a companion statute called the GINA, the Genetic Information Anti-Discrimination Act, GINA. However, there's nothing to replace this in terms of who owns the synthetic genome created by the use of messenger RNA. So now we know that at least in the case of the Moderna shots and in the case of the Pfizer shots, both of which use messenger RNA, that this is the result. I suspect that there is other more recent legislation, case law that would describe adenovirus vectors or genetic modification to also be the same. There is a compendium on gene therapy. This whole industry is so well developed right now. There's a Sears Roebuck catalog. Are you familiar? Do you know what I'm talking about, right? The Sears Roebuck. They used to have these 3-inch thick. So you can go, and I'll send this to you. It's a compendium of gene therapy. You can go to services and tell them, today I'd like to have some flying monkeys. And they'll go do it on their computer. They'll produce it and stick it into a lipid nanoparticle and shoot it out to you. That's how well this industry is already defined.
Well, that's really quite intense. I mean, if all this is reality, which is, it does sound very frightening. Like, how would these people identify their property? Because, these vaccine passports, they might not be, 100% true, because some people might just have the paper without having been vaccinated. So do you think there's something in the vaccine that makes it possible to detect from the outside with what they've been vaccinated?
The answer is yes, and we already know that. So if you were to look at, I believe it's Exhibit 4 in our preliminary injunction, and I'll send that to you. We actually did mass spectrometry on the shots, on both Moderna and on the Pfizer shots. And in there, we found certain components that do exactly what it is you described, including a chemical compound called luciferase. But if you look up SM102, I think is the Moderna shot, and I think it's ALC1035 in the Pfizer shot. Those have the components to understand who has been shot and who hasn't. Of course, you would have seen lots of other people that have done a variety of studies that people are now sending off Bluetooth signals. That's been well verified. It appears, based on our mass spectrometry, that they didn't actually include graphene oxide in the shots. What I've come to find instead is they included all the base compounds in order for the bodies to produce their own graphene oxide. One of our experts has testified that the use of electromagnetic radiation, EMF radiation, what's coming out of your cell phone signals, will actually cause the growth, a 300% increase in graphene dioxide. Is that right? Graphene hydroxide inside the human body. So all they have to do is put the base chemicals into the user, expose them to a certain level of magnetic radiation, cell phone signals at a certain frequency, and those people will actually grow graphene hydroxide inside of them. And you would have seen this again. One of our experts was a mortician. He couldn't get the embalming fluid into the cadavers about, I guess it was January of last year. And so he opened up their arms or their legs, and he pulled out these great giant sheets. They were blood clots the length of the leg, but after you wash the blood away, they were actually sheets. Those components are ostensibly the graphene hydroxide. So it is happening. We know that for a fact. There are autopsies that prove this. Science approves it. Dr. Ryan Cole, I believe, has quite a bit of that science as well. So the short answer to your question is yes, we know that. People are showing up to airports with fictitious vaccine passports, and the customs agents already know you're not vaccinated. That's a forgery. Here we are in the age of digitization. There's no way that you can fake it.
Wow, and do you think, because when our experts looked at the vaccines, like the different charges, is it so they saw a very like variants of mixes of the components, like sometimes you have a bit more copper or like rare earth or whatever inside. Do you think that serves as some sort of fingerprint, or is that a whole different? Why are these different components? Is this like, you just mentioned that you think there may be like different roles for the individual people who receive these shots. Like, what does it do? What's the difference between all these variations of charges?
Good question. Yeah, it's a good question. The short answer to your question is yes. It is highly likely that that's the case for a couple of reasons. Number one, these are phase 3 clinical trials. And in relation to the FDA regulations that govern these, they have the opportunity during their testing in phase 3 to change the ingredients. And they don't even have to tell the FDA until they have their final application. That's exactly what happened. The DOD, by the way, was behind this. They're the ones that commissioned Pfizer and Moderna to do this. This was DOD originated in the test number C459-1001. We have all the data. So the phase 3 clinical trials were designed exactly as you described to test different components, and we don't even know. So, for instance, if you were to look at the patents as it relates to the pathogens that were carried in the lipid nanoparticles, we'll find different ones, 8, 9 different patents, and it appears to us that different people receive different doses, and some of the highest mortality rates associated with a particular serial number of those bats bears exactly out what it is you're saying. The problem we have is that the testers, Pfizer, Moderna, all the EU8 companies do not have to tell us what it is they're testing until they finally get approval and they have labeling requirements.
Actually, here in Germany, there's some sort of regulations where there's not even any, labeling requirements anymore for the vaccines.
Wow.
And or at least the health minister, I don't know if they've already like taken, making use of this, but there is like there's the option in this regulation that you can like say you're not doing any labeling at all. You can use it after the the minimum duration dates, expiring. Like you can use it after that, and also they're not obliged to keep any batches for further future investigation. So you can't.
Well, what is the point of a regulation at all? Why even bother?
Well, it's claimed to be put into place because it's supposed to for the medical needs of the vaccine to kind of to push things to speed up things. Like that's the pretext kind of that it's like less effort for the producers and all that, But obviously,
I saw that else. Actually. It's funny you say that because I noted that Comirnaty was licensed in Germany something like a year before they got the BLA approval in the United States, which, by the way, is not approval. It's approval of what it is they're going to do. It's not approval of the vaccine itself. So it's kind of similar to what it is you're saying. I'm just shocked, though, that there are no particular standards. You can just make it up. So this kind of goes back to my compendium, Sears Roebuck catalog of gene therapy. You can just order up whatever you want. There's no law against it. So have your flying monkeys or whatever you want.
Does that mean, Todd, that the question of how bad is my lot doesn't really play any role anymore because it's not about the spike protein, rather it's about the lipid nanoparticles, and they're the same in every one of these lots?
Well, they all have lipid nanoparticles, all 4 of them, whether that's AstraZeneca, it's called hydrogel generally. Yeah. Whether it's AstraZeneca, J&J. And by the way, all of them share the AD5 adjuvant. It seems as though Sputnik and Sinovac also have this HIV adjuvant. So they give them the whole world AIDS. But to answer your question, in the disclosure to the FDA as to what these shots are made of, we have polyethylene glycol and all these other things that we picked up on mass spectrometry, which showed, by the way, that the ingredients for Moderna were the same as Pfizer. They just had different proportions of polyethylene glycol. Other than that, they were the same. What was different between the two shots is the programming messenger RNA and adenovirus DNA to program the body. So I think to your point, we have no clue what pathogens are inside of those lipid nanoparticles. We just know that the pathogens exist. Who gets what, we have no clue. Some will show up with Ebola, some will show up with Marburg, some will show up with COVID. We just don't know because they don't have to tell anybody.
What shuts off the immune system is the messenger RNA, right?
Well, so the short answer is yes. There are three proteins. The GP120, the AD5 is a recombinant messenger RNA, and then there's the PP14, which is a protein that comes out of pregnant women's placenta, which attacks the cancer T cells. Those appear to be in all of the shots. But just to be clear on this, Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca use synthetic DNA as a vector versus Moderna and Pfizer that use messenger RNA. It accomplishes the same thing.
In other words, unless it's true that some of the lots were just placebos, then everyone who got the shots is in danger.
That's right. They all have AIDS. That's correct.
So what's the point of having all these, additional shots, like the booster and then a fourth and fifth and whatever? Like, what are they? What, in your opinion, what do you think they're adding, like with the additional shots?
Good. I think there's two elements of causation behind that. Number one, I think the goal of the exercise is, in fact, to destroy a person's immune system. So they give them the booster shots for the purpose, then, of rolling in the emergency use authorization, existing Moderna HIV shot. And the reason for that is a control paradigm. When you look at the new war, the new frontier, when you look at DARPA and what the Defense Intelligence Agency came up with in terms of the frontier of the fourth, World War, it's a biomechanical war. So, and it's a genetically modified soldier or person war. And I think you might have seen Kim Jong-un already did a demonstration last summer with his genetically modified super soldiers. That's the new battlefield. And when you read some of the documents, the papers that the governments have written about this new battle frontier, there are constant software upgrades that have to happen to stay competitive in this brand new arms race. So my sense is that if somebody has no immune system whatsoever, and they are required to get these brand new HIV vaccinations once a month for the purpose of staying alive. If you don't get your shot, you're going to die in 30 days. Those additional shots can act as software upgrades. The hardware's already been implemented. People are made of graphene, hydroxide, and whatever else. That's the mainframe. And Bill Gates has actually talked about that, as did Dr. Lieber and Dr. Venter, the creator of artificial life. So once you've got the modified man-machine, how do you upgrade the software to keep competitive in a battle environment? That's what these papers talk about, and I'll send you one. And so my speculation, my theory is that they will have to get monthly shots in order to, number one, stay alive, and number two, receive their software upgrades for whatever purpose they're designed.
Next war will just be reprogramming this artificial stuff.
That's right.
They will try to have programmers on both sides who are better to kill the other ones and so on. It's like it's like a game. It's like boys playing with computers. It's incredible. It's so stupid. It has nothing to do with life. It has nothing to do with human beings. It's just a stupid game.
Yeah. Well, and that's the point. They don't care about human life. In fact, they hate humanity. They want us either gone, owned, or whatever. When you understand the people behind this, I call them the owners. And I call them the owners because the people behind the Bank for International Settlements already own the world's money supply. They own the water supply, the food supply, the electricity supply, the labor supply. They own it all, right? And the owners are all Luciferians, and they hate humanity, and they have a stated goal to genetically modify every species on this planet, starting with us.
I think it's the last chance we have that we make understand the soldiers and the policemen what's going on.
That's right. That's the key.
Because they need them. Because they are very weak people, and they wear a tie, but that doesn't give them strength. I agree. Need those obedient soldiers, and who take the jab, and who then are altered, and so on. And even those who don't yet have the jab, if they obey, they can go on doing these crimes. So we have to inform policemen and soldiers what's going on. We have to tell us.
Well, that's what I was trying to do. In March of last year, I wrote a formal criminal complaint based on crimes against humanity, genocide, and a variety of other crimes. We published it on our website that we built for this very purpose called Vax Choice, VAXX Choice. And after drafting this and publishing it, we had 20,000 downloads in the first month of angry moms at school boards grabbed these things, and they went and they filed them in sheriff's offices around the United States and various countries, because I was trying to achieve exactly what you're saying. I was trying to poison the well in the minds of the people who would be tasked with forcing these shots. And it worked in some cases. And it was also the reason why I sued the DOD. I was trying to educate, and did educate, soldiers in the U.S. military that these are illegal orders and here's what they're doing and why. And our plaintiffs class went from 200,000 when I filed suit. It's probably around 500,000 now, and is growing. So the exact methodology that you're talking about is precisely what it was we intended, and it seems to be working to some extent.
And can I ask you, is this like, what you explained about the HIV shot, this kind of, like vaccine shot? Do you think this is really basically mostly about like control, getting you on the hook to survive? Or is it, is there anything that you could imagine that would be like an enhancement? That you're able to intake oxygen better, so you can basically live on the sea or whatever. Do you see stuff like that also in the pipeline?
For sure, but it's not even a question. So, circa 2001, the U.S. government, the Department of Defense in particular, went into the gene therapy business for exactly what it is you were describing. And in 2005, they got a special exclusion from the Department of Justice as it relates to informed consent. It came out in an opinion, and the secretary, who was it? I can't remember who it was. It was the Department of Justice. Anyway, one of the head of the Department of Justice basically said, "Listen, if for purposes of gene modification, the FDA is no longer involved. Health and Human Services is involved, and for purposes of informed consent that we all know comes from Nuremberg, no longer apply in the traditional sense. All you have to do is let people know that you're doing genetic therapy. That means gene modification, and you don't even have to tell them. You just have to make it so that they could find out." So the U.S. military has been doing gene modification at least since 2005 for exactly what you described, a super soldier program, whether it's swimming under the ocean or flying, I don't know, but it already exists. And if you look, you type in, when you do a search, North Korea super soldiers, you'll see that Kim Jong-un already brought his out and did a demonstration. They're beating these guys with sledgehammers to no avail whatsoever. They seem to be puncture-proof and just extraordinarily durable and fast, and probably require less food, something along those lines. So the answer is yes.
Wow,
for sure.
But this means that you can actually transform like a previous normal human being, like during its lifetime, his or her lifetime, into this sort of special forces or like special capabilities person. It's not like for the next generation, but immediately.
No, it's now. And in fact, there are some scientific studies that show that they can now download information straight into their brains. There was a case the Army did some years ago. They took just a regular old soldier, downloaded information, and he was out flying helicopters later that day. And I happen to be a pilot. I can tell you it takes a long time to master those skills. So that technology already exists, exactly as you described.
So Moderna wasn't joking when they said we can program human beings now.
That's right. That's exactly right. And Charles Lieber was really the guy behind that. He's sitting in jail now. If you look back to his 2009 Harvard study, he was able to atomically weld transistors into the lipid nanoparticles and make them independently responsible, that he could program them, they could move around and become autonomous. And he turned the lipid nanoparticles into nanobots. And with those nanobots, they are able to actually do exactly what you described. They can crawl around in the brain and they can receive information. They can deliver their payloads to one particular part of the body or another. So he was the man that actually made all of that possible, along with Dr. Craig Venter, who's the guy that created synthetic life. He was the guy that sequenced the human genome. And he was able, I think, 3 years ago or so, to sever the heads on some pigs, wait 3 days, and then reanimate the pigs without the heads. They did a study with ferrets relating to coronavirus. They thought that they'd killed the ferrets and buried them, and the ferrets came back to life and dug themselves out. So there is this extra component also of immortality, if you can imagine that. But I have the articles. I'd be happy to send them to you.
That's really very, very creepy. And could you elaborate on what this like biological graphene? So what does that, I mean, what's the point of having this assemble in your body? Is it really just to kill you off with this like 5G thing or?
No, not at all. Well, so three things. Number one, it's extraordinarily conductive. So if a person with graphene hydroxide receives a signal, as I understand it again from our experts, call it a 2 gigahertz signal, they will be able to produce a 1 terahertz signal outbound. They become a battery, and Bill Gates actually has a patent on this, the human battery, and I'll send it to you. So number one, they become generators, electricity generators. Number two, they become sources of intelligence. Everything that person sees, hears, and does is connected through the bionet of things to every other such person and every cell phone tower, and in fact, the cloud. They all become biomachines that are capable of detecting everything: sight, sound, touch, feel, taste, all of that. On top of that, graphene happens to be the single most durable and strong substance on this planet. So when you see Kim Jong-un's super soldiers getting hit with sledgehammers in the head to no avail, that's why you can't even puncture graphene in the single molecular layer. Lastly, it is self-assembling. So when you add they call it telephoresis, teslapherase. When you add an electrical current to graphene oxide or graphene hydroxide, it naturally self-assembles and turns into a conductive circuit. So you're getting all of these things out of the benefit of graphene. There's multiple uses, of course. And then I think, to your point, those people that they don't want to use, they'll just turn them off. Gone.
And if we're looking at immortality, like for these creatures, like I have two questions. Like, do you think would they still be like breeding like additional human beings, and how are they included in this kind of program? Are they really included? I mean, the ones who are behind all this, or whatever, the ones who pull the strings, do you think they like to stay normal human beings, or is this not what they want?
I don't know the answer to that. My sense is that they do have a goal of immortality. How they achieve that immortality, I don't know. And that's something we could look up with Craig Venter. But what I do understand is that they want limited resources on this planet. They've been very clear about that. Bill Gates said we want to get that number down to zero. Well, Georgia Guidestones say no more than 500 million, and you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, they want a 95% reduction in the world's population. So, as to the owners, my suspicion is that they'll want immortality. I don't know if they'll want the rest of the superpowers or not.
They didn't even succeed to make immortal computers now. So we always have to have updated models. Why should they be?
Yeah, true. The Bible talks about it too. Those that take of the mark of the beast will seek to die and not be able to. So as to people who receive the shots, are they going to be human or not? The answer is I don't think so. One other thing to be aware that in the nanoparticles, there's also the delivery of CRISPR technology, which is a gene deletion program. And if you look at the serious adverse events of Pfizer on their post-marketing study that came out of the FOIA request that they had to disclose, the number one serious adverse event that came up was the 1p36 gene deletion syndrome. That is a congenital disease that causes the loss of your frontal cortex. That's your reasoning and thinking behavior. It causes facial tics. It causes biting episodes, things of that nature. So the only way a person who wasn't born with that to get it is because there was a gene deletion that occurred in their body. It also appears that they eliminated the VMAT2, which is the God gene, and the PAX5, which is also related to people's spirituality. So it appears as though those that got those particular ingredients, those gene deletion proteins, will not be thinking. They will act very zombie-like, in fact. And they will have certainly no connection to God, no remorse, no conscience whatsoever.
And some people say that they noticed, some doctors or healers say they noticed different behavior with their patients. Yes. After the shots. They may be more aggressive or they're less reachable. Yes. They just blink, go whatever, don't really get what they're saying. Also, some healers, told me that they're not able to kind of even reach this person anymore, on a spiritual or energetic level. And do you think that's also connected to what you just said?
I do. I do. I would highly suspect that those persons had already suffered the 1p36 gene deletion syndrome. What you described is the very behavior that you would see as a result of that. It's zombification. To be very clear with you, what we do know is that these people have been really good at predictive programming. How many zombie movies have you seen in your life? If you look at Plan 8888, it's the U.S. government's continuity of government plan in case of a zombie apocalypse. They described 5 different types of zombies that they might encounter. Every U.S. agency that is NIST compliant, that has had to provide robust protections for their computer system, has undergone zombie apocalypse invasions. The CDC has had a zombie apocalypse preparedness page up on their websites for the last 5 years. Now they've turned it into a cartoon. Go to the Amazon Web Services agreement, and you will see there's a force majeure clause. If there's a zombie apocalypse, we're not liable. There's too much talk about zombies for us to ignore the fact that the 1p36 gene deletion combined with the VMAT2 and PAX5 deletion creates a zombie-like effect in people. I think that they're just telling us what it is they're going to do. Flick on your 18 gigahertz signal, and bang, you've got a Marburg zombie apocalypse in process.
I mean, this could also be, I read that they claimed that this is sort of a, for educational purposes and really just to get you interested and do this strategic game kind of thing.
Right.
I mean, might be a pretext, but could also be real that they just want to drag your attention.
I can guarantee you. I could absolutely guarantee you, if you were to look at, and I heard that last week, if you go and look at Plan 8888, you will see that in the second page they state exactly what you just said. This is just for purposes of exercise. The problem with that, I'm ex-military. I'm representing all these people in the military. I understand how preparation for war works. You practice where you're going to fight and who you're going to fight, always. If you look at the Plan, it has nothing to do with fighting Ecuador or another country. It has to do with fighting 5 different types of genetically modified zombies. Some are vaccine zombies, some are radiation zombies, some are magic zombies. They have 5 different types of zombies that they are preparing to fight and practicing to do that. It has nothing to do with territory. It has nothing to do with ideology, counterinsurgency. It is only about zombies. So I understand what it is you're saying. I don't believe it for a second.
And I have one last question. So this shedding thing that basically this spills over from one vaccinated person to another. I mean, depending on maybe what's inside, like it's the spike protein or it's whatever. What are your ideas with regards to that problem, or is that a problem?
Well, it is a problem. It's actually in the protocols, the testing protocols published by Pfizer in particular, talk about taking care of clinicians who are overseeing the trials because of the shedding problem. And when I describe the shedding problem, it's actually worse than it sounds. The person who received the gene modification is now producing this synthetic protein, the S protein. And it's not a complete protein. It's a folded protein. That means that they're actually producing prions. Prions are what cause mad cow disease. The guy who was in charge of AstraZeneca, the CEO, died a year ago of prion disease. So it's not just shedding these S proteins that we can all be, immune from if we've had COVID. It's a bigger and different problem. It's a genetic, not genetic, it's a cognitive problem. Prions eventually eat away at your brain. Dr. Cole actually has a lot of really good evidence on that. He's done a number of biopsies and found the prions actually in the tissues of exposed people and those who had the shot. So it's not speculation as to whether or not this is the case. It's a fact.
But when we have contact with proteins, we may eat them, we may have contact on your skins, on mucosa, and so our immune system recognizes them when they are strange and defends us against proteins. I'm not so much afraid of proteins. I'm much more afraid of having those nanoparticles being spread, that they then enter the body by contact. Yeah. So it's not the proteins, I think. I haven't seen evidence that proteins can invade someone.
The prions can. The prions definitely can. There's no two ways about it. We have prion disease all across the United States. Mad cow disease has jumped species into deer and elk and a variety of other things. So I can promise you the prions are an issue. I get your point otherwise. But, if it was just shedding protein, we have natural defenses. Yeah, I understand that point. But
you're very hard to understand. It's very low. Can you tune up, pump up the volume? Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Just
perfect.
That the prions, we know them from BSE, and we know that they only can make damage when they are incorporated, when they get into the body. If we just should eat them, it wouldn't be very dangerous. So we had very, very few cases, although we had lots of cows, mad cows, and having prions, building prions, but there were very, very few people. Only those who got, for instance, organs transplantation or who got tissue transplantation, they got it. But this is a very, very rare thing. So I don't see an epidemic of prion diseases in Europe. I haven't heard about it.
What if it was a bodily fluid exchange, like, for instance, biting? If one person were to bite another, would there be such an exchange? And I say that because that is one of the primary issues with the 1p36 gene deletion. And by the way, in all of the zombie apocalypse scenarios, you will see that there are multinational forces. They all share the same things, right? They're always defending an airport. They're multinational forces, and the zombies are always fighting.
There is another thing that if you want to sell a weapon, if you have a patent, you make it very, very serious that everyone needs this weapon to defend against something. So there's a lot of business behind, and you have to to take away this interest to find out the truth. Really? So this is why I insist on it. I have critical questions on this.
Those are good ones. I agree your point entirely.
They sell so many dangerous weapons because there are so dangerous enemies, and when there are so many weapons never being used because the situation doesn't really come where they could be useful.
I wonder, about that. If the owners didn't spend so much time causing us to hate each other, to fear each other, would we spend so much on weaponology? Would we get along okay? My sense is the owners have been in charge for 2,000 years and been controlling us this very same duopoly paradigm.
It's the same as with the corona vaccination. They make us afraid, and then the politicians buy something against it. This is what they do. They do it
every time.
They do it with vaccines, and they do it with weapons.
The Hegelian dialectic, as I understand it's called.
Yeah.
So, yeah, good point.
We just had the, how many shots did they order? I think they bought stuff for Germany already until like 2029 or so. Is that correct? So what do you think is that already something that's going to be new stuff, like ever evolving, what they will then give to the people?
I think so. So in March, I think it's actually March 22, it happened a couple of days ago, and I'll send you the convention. They had in Texas, a convention on the commercialization of these lipid nanoparticles. I'm also going to send you the NASA warfare plan, NASA, because they talk about the use of these lipid nanoparticles being able to be crop dusted. They fly over a city, they drop the nanoparticles, they go into people's lungs, they burrow in and all to control the human population. This is stuff they talk about. This convention that they had on the 22nd of March was to share the knowledge and technology of commercialization, mass production of these lipid nanoparticles with whatever pathogens, whatever payloads you want to have, in such numbers that they literally now could do exactly as you described and fly over a city and turn everybody into whatever they want to turn.
So it's not the Sahara dust, but it's nanoparticles.
Yes, that's exactly correct. Nanobots, in fact.
Nanobots.
They have transistors.
We could easily analyze the dust and find out what it is.
I think it's a super idea. Well, and it's not like they've been hiding it. They've been talking about smart dust for ages. Right? That definitely exists. I think you won't have a hard time finding it.
But as long as they have billions of people vaccinated or injected, they needn't spray something in the air. They just give it directly into the people.
I think so. I don't know exactly why it is, but my sense is that they needed to install the hardware with people first. That there are 3,300 commercial products, foods, that already have these nanoparticles in them. If you're drinking a Pepsi or a Coke, you are ingesting these nanoparticles. They're everywhere. But for whatever reason, our bodies seem to have the ability to repel these, our natural immunity. So my sense is, in order to do the hardware installation, they had to give people the HIV protein in order to disarm our natural immunity. And that was the key part of these shots. And thereafter, I suppose they can deliver their software upgrades any way they want to, but it's probably most efficient is to shoot them in with a shot.
Well, that is quite a horror show.
Yeah, it is. I'm sorry that that's the case. I am going to send you a lot of information that backs up everything.
Yeah, please do that. Please do that. We have to dig into it now. Yeah. Because this is as horrific as it is, but we have to know about it. We have to get into the details of this in order to be able to, well, at least get an idea of how dangerous. I mean, it's obviously very, very, very dangerous. And what can we do about it?
Yeah. So,
do you know of any way to? Is there any the scientists and doctors who you work with, have they come up with any ideas of how to counteract, of how to flush this out of your system, or does no one know anything?
No, they are. Dr. Lee Vliet is actually really one of the pioneers in all of this, and she's working on that diligently to flush these out. I can tell you right now what the early candidates are. My understanding is that chlorine dioxide strips away the transistors, the welded transistors onto the bots. Chlorine dioxide is fairly common. It's what they call a universal cure. I also understand carbon-60 will capture some of these. She's also talking about some chelated materials that they put into an IV. And I'll get her to talk to you about that. And I'm also volunteering, by the way. All of my expert witnesses are happy to talk to you. They're happy to provide you whatever information it is that you require. So my experts are your experts. And whistleblowers.
Okay, great.
I have one more question. Like when you think about these, now we have the terrestrial G5 towers, and we also have the satellite things. So what's the point? Right. I mean, what's the difference?
I think it's a function of which frequency they're broadcasting on. So, for instance, when we talk about 5G, that's just a range of frequencies, 2 gigahertz up to 300 gigahertz, and they do different things and they have different ranges. What's really troubling about it, really to your point, is that these cell phone towers out here, these 5G towers, have 300 gigawatts of energy. That's 3 megawatts. That's right. Yes, that's right. I think that's right. Gigahertz. Anyway, I get it wrong. 300,000 watts. That is 3 megawatts. That is enough to run a small city, 50, 60,000 people in each and every one of these towers. They are beaming microwave energy, the same stuff you cook food with. They're beaming all the time, and we've got demonstrations of plants and animals, birds falling out of the sky from these signals as it is. These are the powerful ones. These are the strong ones, and it's because apparently at this wavelength, they don't travel very far, and apparently they're easily obstructed. The ones in space, they may be called 5G, but we really don't know what frequency they're broadcasting on. The longer the wave, the further the distance the signal travels. What we do know is there's supposed to be 20,000 of them up there, and that every single part of this planet is going to receive coverage. But it's also important to note, and I'm going to send it to you, from 1976, the U.S. government, the Defense Intelligence Agency, already did all this work for us. They've already told us what frequencies do what things to people, all the way from a half a hertz can affect our mentality if we're happy or sad, even pain levels, all the way up to 300 gigahertz. And you might have seen Australia, they use the active denial system, which operates at 96 gigahertz, and it actually burned the protesters. They literally cooked the protesters, and that was at about a 500-meter distance. So the strength of the tower and the signal are really what guide where they're putting them and what it is they do, and we don't know what those ones in space are doing. We don't even know what these ones are. In the United States, there's no law on this. OSHA, has some limits that if you're going to work around these things, you have to wear protective gear or turn them off. Other than that, there is no protection. In fact, when we studied this, our law firm studied this, we found out in 2019 that in many states, they made it a crime for city council members to vote against the implementation of 5G. There are no standards whatsoever. They could cook us all day long, and there's not a damn thing we can do about it. And what can we do it? If you look at Wuhan, 21 million people, they either ditched their cell phones or they terminated their 5G service in the month of November. So that might be a guide to us. And some of our experts are saying that our phones, our 5G phones, are targeting systems. And I think that's what the Chinese figured out. They just ditched their phones, and, some died from COVID, some didn't. But it's that radiation poisoning that will mimic almost any disease that you can think of. They can create with this electromagnetic radiation. I'm going to send you the Defense Intelligence Agency's paper on the subject.
Would it also be possible to cure? I mean, if you weren't of evil mind, you could also cure with these towers? Absolutely. And we've got an expert by the name of John Waterman. He was on, in fact, let me tell you that we were on Caravan to Midnight is the fortnight intelligence report. I effectively tried my case. I was copying you all and trying my case in the court of public opinion on Saturday night. And so I called my expert witnesses to testify, and that's what they did. And John Waterman talked exactly to that point. The royal rife frequencies, some of these are harmonic and they cure, other ones will kill you. And we actually have that information as well. I'm happy to share that. Again, my experts are yours. If you want to listen to the whole program, it's 3 hours worth of expert testimony. I'm happy to send that to you as well.
Very, very good. Yeah, we must look into this. We must give this a deep dive because this is so important. Please send everything you can.
Sure.
Well, thank you so much. That was very interesting.
It's really my pleasure. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not the look. Just before I run, I'm going to let you know something. I am working on a legal basis to turn off the 5G towers. I think I can do it by virtue of criminal law. The Australians have had some success with that, and I'll keep you updated on what luck I'm having. But I'm starting to get some traction inside, believe it or not, the Department of Defense and various law enforcement agencies, because they're coming to recognize this issue. So the more you all can get this out into the public mind, the more we can demand action, and the higher the chance of success are that we're going to be able to stop this using laws that we already have.
Yeah, we'll do the best we can to spread all this. I think many millions of people will watch this because this is just incredible.
Yeah, I wish it weren't so.
Yeah, me too. Okay, well, Todd, it's a pleasure under the circumstances.
Yeah, likewise.
We must stay connected, obviously, and sure, I think there'll be there will be a cooperation. We'll be in touch, and we need to do something together.
Great. I look forward to it. Really,
thank you very kindly.
ANCAP Radio, thank you for tuning in today. That was a live replay with Todd Callender, who was unable to join us today, but we did connect with Todd while that was going, and we're going to bring him back here on stream in the near future. Looks like probably within the next 30 days or so. So again, thank you for tuning in. Next week, we're going to be back here at 3 p.m. Eastern again, as always, joined by co-founders of ANCAP Radio, Dave Henderson and Doug Casey. So definitely in for a treat next week. Make sure you set your reminders for that as soon as that goes out. You can follow ANCAP Radio right now for more information. You can also go to ancapradio.com for more information as well. All of the links from today's show are down below in the thread if you take a look. Be sure to check out Todd, of course. vaxchoice.com is his website, and he's working on a lot of just very impressive things here moving forward. So make sure you check out all things Todd Callender, who will be joining us live eventually, right? Unfortunately, we couldn't get him here today, but he will be back. So again, thank you for your listenership. If you're on the replay, thank you over there as well. And we'll see you next week at 3 p.m. with Dave and Doug. Thank you.